Welcome to Top Amazing Fact. Ever been stung by a honeybee? Ouch. It's one of those pains that really gets you. First, it burns like crazy for hours, then it swells up into a big, red welt that sticks around for days. But as much as it sucks for you, it's actually the bee that gets the worst deal out of this situation. Believe it or not, just a few minutes after stinging you, that bee is a goner. But wait, why on earth would an animal have a defense mechanism that's deadlier to itself than to whatever it's attacking? That doesn't make any sense, right? Well, there's a lot more going on with this kamikaze defense mechanism than you might think. So grab some ice and put on some thick gloves, because we're about to take a painful deep dive into the secrets behind bee stings. The sting operation. Okay, let's face it, if you've ever been stung by a bee, chances are it was at least partially your fault. Sorry, but bees generally don't go around stinging people for fun. They usually only sting when they feel threatened, like if you're getting too close to their hive or acting a bit too aggressive for their liking. If a bee's just out collecting pollen, it's likely to leave you alone unless you do something like handle it roughly or accidentally step on it. Now, you've probably heard that all bees die after stinging someone. Well, that's not exactly true. Only honeybees have this unfortunate fate. When any bee stings you, it's basically just sticking its stinger into your skin. But here's where honeybees are different. Their stingers are made up of two barbed lancets, which give them a jagged edge that works like tiny hooks. So, when a honeybee stings, it's like it's throwing a grappling hook into your skin. The barbs make it impossible for the bee to pull its stinger out. But the bee still tries to fly away, and when it does, the stinger gets ripped out of its body, along with the muscles, nerves, and even some of its digestive system. Yeah, it's as brutal as it sounds. And it's not just the pain that makes this such a tragic way for a bee to go. There's something even more heartbreaking about the whole thing. When honeybees sting other insects, like when they're defending their hive from a bug attack, they don't have any trouble pulling their stingers back out. It all comes down to the amount of fiber in the animal's skin. The barbed lancets on a honeybee's stinger are designed to dig in deep, and when they hit the thick, fibrous skin of a mammal, that stinger isn't coming out without a serious tear. Unfortunately, those poor honeybees don't realize that when they sting us, it's a one-way ticket to the afterlife. But let's talk about us humans. What exactly happens when a bee stings us? Well, a bee sting injects a venomous toxin called molybdenum, which is what makes it hurt so much. If you're allergic to bee stings, molybdenum is likely the culprit. This toxin causes the area around the sting to become red and swollen. And since bee venom is water-soluble, it spreads easily throughout the body. Considering that about 60% of the human body is water, that venom can cover a lot of ground. If you ever get stung by a honeybee, here's something you need to remember: get that stinger out right away. Along with the stinger, the bee leaves behind muscles, nerves, and pulsating sacs of molybdenum that keep pumping venom into your skin until they're removed. So, the sooner you pick it out, the better. The longer that stinger stays in, the more molybdenum gets injected, and the itchier and more swollen the area will become. Just ask the guy who got stung on the tongue. Ouch. I'm reaching for ice just thinking about it. It's painful to imagine, but you know what's totally painless? Hitting the like and subscribe buttons below. Done? Awesome. Now, we've seen how honeybees meet their unfortunate fate, but why do they sting in the first place? And how do they handle parasites that set up shop on their rear ends? Stick around to find out. Stingless bees. For anyone who's terrified of bees, this might sound like a dream. A lot of bees can't sting at all. That's right, all male bees and many female bees from various bee families simply don't have stingers. Take the Andrenidae family, for example. These bees have such reduced stingers that they couldn't sting you even if they tried. Then there's the Meliponini, also known as stingless bees. These bees are found in subtropical regions like Australia, Africa, Southeast Asia, and parts of Brazil and Mexico. In fact, most bees in Central and South America are stingless. So, if you're really not a fan of bee stings, now you know where to book your next vacation. But without a stinger, how do stingless bees defend themselves? Well, like many other insects, they resort to biting. And just like their stinging cousins, stingless bees use their bite to cling to their enemies, sometimes to the death, either theirs or their attackers. So, they're just as self-sacrificial as the bees with stingers. On second thought, maybe I should take back what I said about ideal vacation spots. Nowhere's truly safe. Stingless bee colonies can range from 3,000 to 80,000 workers, just like regular bees. However, only a few species of stingless bees produce enough honey to be farmed by humans. But that hasn't stopped us from finding other uses for them. Because they're relatively harmless, many people, especially in Brazil, keep stingless bees as pets. So, if you're in the market for an unconventional pet, a stingless bee colony might be the way to go. No need for walks, no poop to pick up, and you might even score some free honey. Suddenly, my dog seems like a bit of a high-maintenance investment. The stinging scheme. Let's circle back to bees that can sting. Ever wondered how a bee decides whether or not to use its stinger? To answer that, we first need to dive into the world of pheromones. A pheromone is a chemical or a mix of chemicals that an organism releases to influence the behavior of others in its species. In other words, it's like a chemical message communicated mostly through smell. It might sound wild, but these chemical signals are crucial for a bee's survival. For example, there's something called a primer pheromone, which can cause long-term changes in a bee's physiology and behavior. Yep, a simple chemical signal can actually change a bee's body during development. Crazy, right? But then there are releaser pheromones, which cause a rapid change in behavior. Alarm pheromones, a type of releaser, are released right after a bee stings something. This alerts other bees that there's a threat nearby, signaling them to attack the intruder. But how do bees know when to stop stinging? A team of researchers from the universities of Constance and Innsbruck cracked this mystery in 2021. They discovered that bees decide whether or not to sting based almost entirely on the amount of alarm pheromone in the air. It turns out bees have two internal thresholds that measure these pheromone levels. One tells them when it's time to start stinging, and the other tells them when to stop. It's almost like they have an internal thermometer, but for deciding when to get violent. These pheromones also help bees gauge the level of threat they're facing. The more pheromone in the air, the greater the danger. So, the more an intruder gets stung, the more bees swarm to fight it off. Considering a single colony can have over 100,000 bees, that's definitely not a fight you want to be on the wrong side of. Killer bees. Back in 2019, experts estimated that your chances of dying from an allergic reaction to a bee sting were about 1 in 59,507, or just 0.00168%. Phew, most of us can breathe easy, right? Well, that's true if you're dealing with regular honeybees. But your odds take a sharp nosedive if you encounter Africanized bees in North or South America. These bees have quite the backstory. In 1956, scientists brought African bees to Brazil in an attempt to develop a honeybee better suited to tropical climates. The bees were placed in quarantine, but 26 queens escaped. These queens then bred with native Brazilian bees, creating a new species of ultra-aggressive, ultra-lethal bees that have since spread across the Americas. Now, if that isn't the perfect villain origin story, I don't know what is. Africanized bees are incredibly defensive and will unleash a full-scale attack at the slightest provocation. I'm not kidding, these bees have killed over 1,000 people, with victims often found with 10 times more stings than those attacked by European bees. And if you think you can outrun them, think again. They've been known to chase people for up to a quarter of a mile. Now, their scary high death rate isn't because they have more venomous stings than other bees. It's because they attack in massive numbers. We're talking swarms of up to 800,000 bees. So, how many stings can a person actually survive before things take a turn for the worst? On average, a person can tolerate about 10 stings per pound of body weight. That means, assuming no allergic reaction, the average adult can withstand roughly 1,000 stings, while a child can only handle around 500. But against 800,000 angry Africanized bees? Less than 0.2% of the swarm would be enough to take you down. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm definitely going to work on my quarter-mile sprint. Wasps the difference? We can't talk about bees, nature's honeymakers, without mentioning wasps, nature's, well, let's just say troublemakers. Unlike bees, wasps don't have barbed stingers, which means they can sting repeatedly without any risk of dying. Unfortunately for us, that makes them even more of a nuisance. But even though their stings might feel similar, wasp stings are actually made up of a completely different set of toxins. One way to compare them is using the pH scale, which measures how acidic or alkaline a substance is on a scale from 0 to 14. A 0 on the pH scale is purely acidic, like battery acid, while a 14 is entirely alkaline, like drain cleaner. Water, for example, is right in the middle at a 7, making it neutral, not acidic or alkaline. So, where do bee and wasp stings fall on the pH scale? Bee stings score between 4.5 and 5.5, which means they're slightly acidic, about as acidic as tomato juice or beer. On the other hand, wasp stings score between 6.8 and 6.9, making them just slightly alkaline, similar to saliva, milk, or urine. Given those options, I'd definitely prefer to be stung by a bee. The pH scale not only shows how different bee and wasp stings are, but it also explains why people have distinct reactions to them. While our bodies might react similarly to these toxins, you might be surprised to learn that being allergic to bee stings doesn't necessarily mean you're allergic to wasp stings. And it goes both ways, of course. If you're allergic to wasp stings, it doesn't mean you're necessarily allergic to bee stings. But while we're on the topic of stings, let's not forget the bee's other notorious cousin, the hornet. Technically, hornets are a specific type of wasp, but they're so much larger than the average wasp that they've earned their own classification and a fearsome reputation. Hornets are generally a bit friendlier than wasps, but when they do get aggressive, their stings are far more painful. That's because their venom is loaded with acetylcholine, a powerful pain stimulant, almost like they were designed by some evil force purely to inflict pain. However, hornets aren't immune to pain themselves. Standard hornets can grow up to 2 inches in size, making them large enough to be infected by a parasite called Xenos mutoni. This parasite lives inside the hornet's body and causes it to drastically change its behavior. Infected hornets will fly to meet other infected hornets so the parasites can mate. The male parasite leaves its host hornet and crawls into a hornet hosting a female parasite. Hornets infected with the male parasite eventually die. These parasites might look like the most dangerous stingers in the insect world. But thankfully, they're more of a threat to hornets than to us, sting spawners. Now, I've been calling them stingers, but the scientific name for that pointy end of a bee is actually the ovipositor. And believe it or not, they're meant to do more than just deliver a painful sting. So, what exactly is an ovipositor? Good question. An ovipositor is a tube-like organ used by some female insects to help maneuver their eggs. It's designed to create space for an egg, transmit it, and then attach it to a surface. So, the so-called stingers of bees, as well as wasps, hornets, and ants, are actually modified ovipositors. In the case of bee stingers, these ovipositors are equipped with venom glands, like the ones we've discussed. As for queen bees, who are the main reproducers in most colonies, their ovipositors are a bit different. The queen's ovipositor is smaller, smoother, and unbarbed, making it more effective for laying eggs, a crucial task since a healthy queen can lay up to 3,000 eggs a day at her peak. But when two queens meet, their ovipositors turn into deadly weapons, and a fight to the death ensues, think Highlander style, because there can be only one queen. On the other hand, worker bees can still use their ovipositors for their original purpose. If a hive loses its queen, the pheromones that the queen releases to suppress ovary development in other female bees stop being produced. This means that without the queen, the worker bees' bodies begin to develop the organs needed to reproduce. However, if by some strange chance a worker bee tries to lay eggs while the queen is still alive, a conflict would erupt. It seems there's only room for one queen bee in the hive. Elephant enemies. You've probably heard the rumor that elephants are hilariously afraid of mice. Whether that's true or not is still up for debate, but there is one animal that definitely gives elephants nightmares. Can you guess what it is? Yep, elephants are terrified of bees. As crazy as it sounds, The world's largest land animal reacts wildly to these tiny insects. Here's the thing, while bee stings can easily penetrate human skin, an elephant's skin is way too thick for bees to make a dent. But bees can still attack the more sensitive parts of an elephant, like its trunk, mouth, and eyes, and when they do it in massive swarms, it causes a lot of pain. Elephants are so big that they generally don't have any natural predators, so they're not used to this kind of terrifying invasion. In fact, conservationists have started using this fear to protect elephants from poachers and farmers. Researchers and advocates now suggest that farmers surround their fields with beehives to keep elephants away. And this tactic works in an impressive 80% of cases. But there's a catch: the farmers have to use real bees. Despite their fear, elephants have the largest brains of any land animal, with as many neurons as the human brain. This means they're smart enough to tell the difference between an empty beehive and an active one. In some instances, when just the sound of buzzing bees was played from the hive, the elephants quickly figured out that the threat wasn't real. Now, that's what I call jumbo smarts. Bee therapy. You'd think after all we've learned, most people would do anything to avoid a bee sting. But if that's what you're thinking, you're in for a surprise. Some folks actually believe bee stings are good for them. I'm talking about apitherapy, also known as bee venom therapy, which involves medical treatments delivered through bee stings. In apitherapy, a person might receive up to 40 stings in a single session. Ice is typically used to numb the skin and reduce the pain. The idea behind apitherapy is that bee stings cause inflammation, which in turn triggers the body's anti-inflammatory response. Some believe this could benefit people with conditions like multiple sclerosis, MS. But others are drawn to it simply because, wherever there's a wild health fad, there's always a group of people willing to try it out. In 2005, a clinical trial was conducted to compare people with MS who received bee venom therapy every week to those who received no treatment at all. After 24 weeks of measuring things like fatigue and quality of life, the results were clear. And the verdict? Drumroll, please. There was absolutely no difference between the two groups. Well, thank God no one's told Gwyneth Paltrow about this yet. Who knew there was so much behind one little bee sting? Have you ever been stung yourself, or do you have any incredible tales stemming from a single sting? Let me know down in the comments below, and thanks for watching.